Hey friends, Happy New Year. I'm going to invite you to our very first podcast of 2025. We are hitting a variety of hot button issues today. We're talking about visas. We're talking about American culture. And are we producing excellence? We're talking about the collapse of higher education that's coming due to a lot of factors. We're going to talk about that. And lastly, we're going to talk about justice. The Bible says this: there's two things that the Lord hates: punishing the innocent and letting the guilty go free. We're going to be talking today about the whole constitutional prerogative of presidential pardons. And what's the history behind the presidential pardon, and how should it be used, and is it being used correctly today, especially by our current president, Mr. Biden? So we're going to get into a lot of these issues. You will not want to miss the podcast.
Hey, welcome to the Ron Johnson Discipleship Podcast.
Here we are again, our first podcast of 2025.
It's already here.
I hear the roar. I heard the roar out there in whatever world that is, cyber world or wherever, outer space.
Twitter world.
X-world. Yeah, anyway, I could hear all of our listeners out there. Dave, I'm giving a shout out to Dave, Sam, my mom. All right, I can't go on any farther than this. Does your mom listen to our podcast?
I don't know.
Drew, if your mom isn't nailed down on this.
I don't know. She probably does listen to her. Let's say English is not her first language.
All right.
We might have to talk a lot slower for her to understand what we're saying. So.
We'll let her slide. But anyway, we said hi to all of our friends out there. It's a new year. I'm excited about this year. We just wrapped up an amazing Christmas season, and saw so many beautiful things happening in terms of just Jesus touching people's lives. We're sitting here in this gorgeous foyer and looking at our children's wing, all the new additions there, which has been incredible.
Amazing. I see those new words on the
entrance. That was really cool.
That was really cool, yeah.
So that's the west entry. If you want to come in that way, we got some new stuff to see on the wall there, some vision stuff. And then who would have thought we'd be so giddy over asphalt? Are you giddy?
Yes.
I'm giddy. I'm pretty giddy about it. Pretty awesome that I want to go take a peek to see how traffic's flowing. I need to get the word from the men in the parking lot on what's really happening. The street
the exit rate, the stopwatch.
Yeah, I don't see cars like lined up staring into my office on Sunday like, Pastor, why did you do this? So anyway, it's been a great Christmas. When you're hearing this, this is Wednesday morning. We're actually speaking ahead. We're changing our schedule, just so you guys know. We're recording on Monday. So this is a couple of days before New Year's, but we're acting as if it's already been here because you guys are seeing this on Thursday morning. Next week, we are going to be launching into a lot of exciting things at Living Stones, our new growth track, our foundations course that'll be coming on Wednesday night. A couple starting points that are coming up this month for anybody that's new to our culture. Anyway, I'm really, really excited. I love talking about growth and multiplication and all of these things that are kingdom things. We're going to be picking up on that theme on Sunday the next couple of weeks, so you will not want to miss being with us at Living Stones. But let's go back to our pre-podcast discussions, which you guys don't get to hear, but we get to pull that out and go live with you now. But Pastor Andrew and I were talking about the latest scuffle on X. So let's talk a little bit about that, because I think it brings up some really, really good points regarding Christian worldview and who we are as a people.
Yeah, we're talking about, it's interesting because I got off X for a couple days and I got back on. And apparently there was like a huge conservative civil war, which like it wasn't. But over H-1B visa,
okay.
I think that's the term for it. Basically, it's visa extended to workers from other nations. This is legal immigration now,
right.
Who supposedly have special skills.
Right.
And the discussion is really about whether this whole program was abused in basically bringing cheap laborers from other nations to replace American workers.
So the idea was if we need a certain skill set that we can't find here in America, then we have the right to bring in, highly skilled people to perform that function.
The idea is to hire the Einsteins who are, in a different country. You're like, you know what? There's only one Einstein, and we don't have an Einstein here.
Yeah.
Let's hire him over here to help us to take our technology
So it
to the next level.
wasn't supposed to be for lower skilled type of workers.
That's my understanding. Yeah.
Okay.
So that the idea is not to lower our wage cost.
Right.
It's not to lower your overhead and have cheap workers.
Right. In other words, there should be some type of rationale for who we're letting into this country. We just got done with, are trying to end a massive debacle at our border, just letting anybody and their brother into our nation, people who hate America, people who are criminals, people who have not been vetted. That never should be taking place. And in fact, we should be finding people who share our values, love our nation, and have a unique skill set to add to the American experience.
So I don't really even know very well the proper legal immigration process. This is not the H-1B, just in general. Like if you live in a different country, you want to be American, or you want to come to the States, you want to get a visa. I don't know that process.
Yeah.
But the H-1B it's kind of like get ahead of the line because you have a sponsor, you have a company that says we need this unique worker. So it's a very privileged position.
Yeah.
And the concern is we using this privileged position to undercut American workers. That
was the argument. Well, I saw a very what became a very controversial post by Vivek.
Vivek, yeah.
He basically said the issue that we're discussing here is one of culture, which I don't know that necessarily I have to agree with every single point he makes, but I think the discussion of culture is a huge discussion. In other words, his point was the reason that we have to go outside of America to find, for instance, students who are really good in math or science or engineers is because our American culture does not encourage the type of study, effort, hard work. It almost promotes laziness, things that in our culture should not maybe be valued as much. And he said until we kind of shift the way we're raising our children and what we're expecting from our children in terms of responsibility, hard work, so forth and so on, until that changes, we're not gonna have the Einsteins in America. And people obviously they take one word or one point and swing at the other side and and kind of blow things out of proportion. But I sat there reading that going, you know what, I think there's a lot of truth there. You can't expect someone to be an outstanding engineer if they're not willing to go through the academic rigor and mental gymnastics and hard work that it takes to master something like that. I mean, engineering is a hard science. You can't fudge. People's lives are at stake, right? If you have a bad engineer.
Yeah, it's a very layered issue because you talk about, because part of this is a commentary on the current educational system in America today. I'm not even just talking about like college. I'm talking about high school. I'm talking about primary school. Is our current educational system really rigorous enough, or is it are the teachers motivated enough? We can go into the fundamentals, right? But it's also in terms of just in general, when you are in a prosperous nation, there is not that drive as much to study 10 hours a day. I mean, I know in Asia, there's some kids who.
Right. So to be able to go to a university to get an advanced degree, and a degree that's going to enable you to kind of write your ticket, to pretty much change your world, there are many people who will work very, very hard to change their current reality. But in America, where we're blessed, hey, we got it pretty good.
They're not necessarily that drive. That's just human nature. Complacency comes in when you're prosperous. So there's a lot of different factors involved in that picture, right? And some of it's real. A lot of it's real. It's reality.
Yeah. Well, maybe a good transition. Talking about education. This was an interesting article. It says, class dismissed. Colleges expected to close as enrollment numbers tank. Colleges could see enrollment numbers fall to record lows over the next decade. So it says here more than 500 nonprofit private colleges have shut down in the last decade, according to the Wall Street Journal, which was 3 times what it was in the decade prior. So we're already seeing a lot of schools really struggling with enrollment, especially with young men who aren't buying it anymore. And there's a lot of factors here, and we've talked about it on this podcast before. Number one is a birth deficit. We're just not reproducing. And so what's happening is when young people are getting to be college age, there's less has college-age young people to choose from, and then fewer of them are actually saying, you know what, I think it's a good investment. And part of why they're questioning that, and why parents are questioning that, is because of the poison that's been taking place, the poisoning of our students' minds when they go off, especially to state universities, where they get all kinds of CRT and DEI and all the neo-Marxist kind of nonsense, and they get poisoned about America and America's history, and America's an evil place, and the Constitution's evil, and our founding fathers were evil, and you know, they actually foster. They groom, to use a word, they groom an anti-American hatred in the very people who, you know, parents are at home sending off these nice paychecks to pay for bloated tuitions that have never been adjusted for inflation or had to cut back or anything like that. And we're going, wait a minute, why am I going to send my kid? You know, I was just talking to a parent a couple Sundays ago whose child went off to school on a sports scholarship and then was basically groomed by some lesbian gals on one of her teams. And now she's kind of fighting and embracing all this kind of crazy gender ideology stuff. And they're like, you know, we sent her there on a sports scholarship, and now we're fighting for her sanity. Because of the environment that was so toxic at that university. So again, most parents are like, why would I want to send my kid to a place like that where they're not going to learn they're not going to get a degree that's going to get them anywhere or teach them a hard science or something like that. They're going to be full of all kinds of, you know, indoctrination that's basically going to poison them and create a wedge between, you know, parents and children in terms of their values and their vision for their life.
Yeah, and not even talking about the inflation in college prices. Like, I haven't checked college prices in a while. I remember when I went to pretty expensive private college in my days, but it is nothing compared to the price today.
Well, it's funny that you bring that up. Cost of tuition and fees plus room and board for a 4-year private college averaged just under $60,000 for the 24-25 school year. With inflation, that's roughly $250,000 to get one child through a 4-year college education. Now, I had 8 kids, so like do the math. I wouldn't make that much money in my entire life, let alone, you know, trying to pay for one kid, let alone 8 kids. And so we had to come up with some creative options. If parents and students continue to question the hefty price tag of a college education, we could see enrollment fall to record lows over the next decade, and more colleges close their doors and shut down their operations. So, I mean, this is a really, really serious thing. And I was even noticing this, you know, the ultimate insult is you send your kid off to a, quote, Christian university. And I won't mention any names, but you send your kid off to a Christian university that's supposed to be loving Jesus and having chapel and you know, having worship and teaching your class from a biblical worldview perspective, and everything is centered around Jesus. No, you're gonna pay all this money, $250,000, to send your kid off to a, quote, Christian university that's teaching the same woke crap that you would get at a public university. It's like, this is the height of insanity. So I think a lot of these presidents, including at my own alma mater, not that it ever went woke, but my own alma mater, the new president came in and basically righted the ship because I think he could see the handwriting on the wall. In addition to just being faithful to the Lord, faithful to God's word, he's going, you know what? Why would anybody, what is the unique distinguishing factor that causes a parent to say, I want my child to go to that Christian university? What makes it different than the local, community college? It's Jesus. It's a quality Christ-centered education. And so when our public or when our Christian universities are failing and going woke, that's a sure sign you're going out of business, because I can go woke for a whole lot less money by sending my kid in my own backyard. Yeah. My goodness.
You're talking about $250K, it's like buying a house, right? So essentially what you're saying to these college kids is, hey, after 4 years of college, which, depending on your degree, you probably aren't going to find a job, like a great paying job. You might need to go to graduate school or get some experience, but you basically are labored with a mortgage on the house.
Yeah.
without a house.
Yeah,
with
without the
nothing
house.
to live in. Right.
Yeah, and a massive hole that you have to dig out of.
Right. Now, I'm sure there's student loans, all that stuff, but what that does is drives the inflation costs higher up and taxes.
Well,
So-
and again, you take out a student loan, it's just that. It's a
Yeah.
loan. You're responsible to pay it back. And it takes a lot of these young people, decades to pay back some of these student loans. As they're now they're perhaps married or they're starting a family, and now you got the responsibilities of kids and all of that. And it's like when do I ever get out of this incredible hole? So I think there's been a lot of second guessing about is a university degree, do you get the value out of it that you once got out of it? And again, I'm not poo-poo higher education. Both of us have degrees, and I enjoyed my Christ-centered experience where I was at, and I felt like it was a worthy investment. But these are good questions to ask, because a lot of these parents and a lot of these young people are voting with their feet, and they're going, you know what, I think I'm going to, they were mentioning in this article the trades. There's going to be, for instance, a deficit of plumbers. A serious deficit of plumbing. Well, last time I checked, we need plumbing, like all of us do.
Electricians,
Yeah.
drywallers,
Yep.
laborers.
Yep.
So, I mean, gone the days you just send your kid to the local college, right? The university of, whatever your state from. I think those days are gone. I think parents are so much more careful
Yep.
in thinking about what college, why they're going to college. Are
Yeah.
they just going to college to get a liberal arts degree, or are you going there because you need a degree? You want to be an attorney, so you need to get a bachelor's degree. I think that this is good because it makes parents who are paying for all this think twice about the culture, about do they really need a degree? Is it better bang for my buck to get my kid to go to technical school instead?
Absolutely.
To go learn a trade,
Yep.
go work with some business for a couple of years, get some experience in.
Well, I'm having a discussion right now with one of my children who's basically saying, you know what, Dad, I can get the same degree online. I can save the room and board. I can be in an environment here that's healthy and that honors Jesus. I can work a job and do my school on my schedule, not based on this, the school schedule. And I used to be more suspect of, online learning, because I think there's something valuable about, being in a classroom setting, being able to ask questions and interact and all that. But man, when again you look at the cost, and then you look at the type of education that's being delivered now online at so many places, it makes you second guess. As you said, because these students now can graduate by owning their own house instead of owing the amount of a house, because they stayed local, saved up some money, and took classes online. So there's a lot more options. They're also talking about military service, talking about trade schools, local colleges, those types of things. A lot more options that young people are having.
And so much of the high-level curriculum materials you can find for free online.
Well, that's what one of my kids was saying too. Saying, Dad, I learned most of my stuff by watching a video or a lecture online.
Yeah.
And I'm like, all right, well, there you go.
Now, I know for some jobs you have to get that degree. I mean, you can't just say, I watched 14 YouTube videos. You have to get a degree. I get it, But I just think more and more people, because of all those different factors, are so much more discerning on whether send the kids to
And we
college.
haven't even mentioned this factor. How about the fact that the Biden administration was actively working with federal agencies to attack Christian universities, to attack Christian parents who were protesting what was going on in our public spaces of learning. And so outcomes, ready for this, a 17,000-page report. During its 4 years in office, the Biden-Harris administration conducted a whole-of-government attempt to surveil, censor, and possibly imprison conservative Christians, and the FBI acted as, quote, a winning participant in their harassment campaign, a massive new government report details.
So the scariest part about this is that I bet every person who's listening right now is not surprised. Were you surprised when you saw that?
No, because I was, when you have the FBI showing up, for instance, at a pro-life leader's house in the morning in front of his 6 or 8 kids with machine guns and SWAT uniforms on, because this guy was standing out peacefully protesting in front of an abortion mill, you're going, what in the world? I mean, I was livid. So this doesn't surprise me at all.
And to me, that's the worst part. It's normalized. we see that, we're just like, oh, of course. Like this confirms what we already
Yeah, that's
know.
what the FBI is for. No, that's not what the FBI.
When you see this, it should be in a normal world. It should be like the biggest scandal in the world, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. Like the Americans should be. I mean, we threw a bunch of tea in the Boston Harbor, right?
This
over
is the
all-
stuff you talk about, like fascist communist nation does stuff like this. And we're
So
just
this
like,
is it.
yeah.
When
what else
COVID
is
happened,
new?
of course, everything went online, and so parents are sitting in their living room
Yeah.
or kitchen watching their son or daughter's school be delivered online, and they're going, "What did they just say? What are they reading? What is that assignment?" It was all this perverted. A lot of it was sick, perverted, twisted stuff, and pornographic in some cases. And so parents started showing up at school board meetings and demanding answers, and then they called them domestic terrorists. I mean, this kind of stuff is, I believe, had a massive impact on the sway of this last election results. I think parents are going, you know what? Over my dead body, are you gonna allow this to happen in our school with my children present? We demand, change. And so again, this was a proven partnership with the Biden administration and the FBI. All right, and not only that, but there were radical Catholics. They were investigating these radical Catholics who actually were practicing their faith
Right.
and infiltrating their services to document what was going on and what was being said. So now you have, this is like KGB stuff. This is like what you would see back in
Exactly.
Nazi Germany.
Exactly.
Unbelievable.
And again, like I heard about that report on X. I kept scrolling because I was like, I wasn't. It wasn't like, oh my goodness. I mean, of course it's true.
I mean,
Of
your
course it's
point
true.
is so well taken. We should have been going, what? I mean, we should have been flooding the streets.
That's the state of our nation. I mean, again, like you. Probably in a few months, we're going to hear more things about the current regime. I'm not going to be shocked about nothing I hear.
I hope I'm not going to be shocked, but I will be shocked if there's actually justice.
Oh, that I will be shocked. If anyone actually got like fired or go to jail because of this, then I will be shocked.
But it needs to happen.
Right.
I mean, it absolutely needs to happen. Which leads us to another point. You're doing such a great job throwing me these softballs for these segues today. Let's talk about justice. The Bible says, Proverbs 17, verse 15, the Lord hates these two things: punishing the innocent and letting the guilty go free. Proverbs 17:15. Punishing the innocent and letting the guilty go free. So we had this discussion, I think, last time we were on this podcast. We were talking about this whole notion of executive branch pardons. Like, where did the president of the United States, or where did this tradition, and it's a constitutional provision, so it's more than a tradition, but where did this idea come from? What are the roots of it? And I didn't know, and I don't know that you knew, and so I jumped online. This is the history of pardon power, executive unilateralism in the Constitution. Article 2, Section 2 of the Constitution states that the president has the authority to, quote, grant reprieves and pardons for offenses against the United States except in cases of impeachment. The United States Supreme Court has interpreted this power as plenary, this is important, meaning that is considerably broad and not generally subject to congressional modification. So this was it goes all the way back to English history. It was previously known as the, quote, prerogative of mercy. It appeared in the 7th century, and there have been abuses of this power over time, leading to limitations on it. But the pardon power persisted through the American colonial period, and this is interesting. Alexander Hamilton was the one who introduced the concept of pardon power at the Constitutional Convention. Interestingly enough, who was the first president in the United States to grant a pardon?
It's not over Turkey, is it? Didn't they grant pardon over turkeys and
No.
That's not that one.
This is
Okay.
not the turkey
Okay,
pardon.
Okay, no.
This is interesting. This is George Washington.
Oh, he actually gave a pardon?
Yep, the first presidential pardon, 1795, over the Whiskey Rebellion in western Pennsylvania. So I'd have to go do some research on the Whiskey Rebellion.
Yeah, no.
This was interesting. Some notable pardons. Gerald Ford granted a pardon to Richard Nixon.
That's the only one I know.
For the purpose, he said, of restoring domestic tranquility in a nation after Watergate. Another controversial pardon was Andrew Johnson's pardon of Jefferson Davis, the president of the Confederacy. In fact, they go back to Gerald Ford. They said that pardon was so unpopular, it might have been largely the reason behind his failed presidential
So
bid.
in those two cases, they pardoned because it wasn't even the individual. It was kind of like for the greater peace
Of the nation.
of the nation.
Yeah, that was the rationale. Interestingly enough, who do you think offered the most presidential pardons out of any president ever?
I know because you just told me, but I'm not shocked when you told me.
Barack Obama, 3,069 acts of executive clemency. The least amount was George W. Bush, 200. So that's a radical
So when
difference.
I hear 3,000 is what I think. He's not there thinking, should I really pardon? He got a committee, he got an aide who went out and found some kind of qualifications, criteria, and bring it to his desk, and he's just like,
Well, and then, okay.
is that the point of pardon? That's my question, right?
Yeah, a lot of these pardons are not based on for the good of the nation, blah blah blah, or a controversial situation where there was a heightened disagreement ideologically or something like that. These are political pardons that are either paying people back or they're being driven by a progressive understanding of justice. And when you look at what President Biden just did, we talked about this. Giving your son, for instance, a pardon that lasts for a certain acts covering a certain time period. In other words, I'm not going to pardon you for this behavior or for this crime. I'm going to pardon you for anything you might have done or absolutely did over this.
Or could have done, or might have done, or thought about doing.
And now we're raising the question of preemptive pardon. So now Biden wants to cover anybody that he thinks might have broken the law or that this new administration will go after. For instance, Liz Cheney, Anthony Fauci, who, again, my goodness, where's there going to be justice for all the lies on the vaccine that we're told and all the damage that was done, all the people that have died, all the people that are dealing with health issues? When is there going to be justice for him? And now, before we even have a chance to dive into the data, which is numerous. In fact, I found another interesting study that said almost every single one of the, quote, conspiracy theories, I think except one, was proven to be absolutely true. So we haven't even got into the corruption that's buried in these situations. And now we have a president who's going to preemptively try to pardon some folks. In fact, you go back to what he did. He had 39 pardons and just one shy of 1,500 commutation of sentences. And some of these sentences were just unbelievable. Like this one right here. This guy was convicted of $35 million fraud, the largest single no-fault car insurance fraud scheme ever prosecuted. So this guy stole $35 million from New York citizens, and he just got off. I have no idea why. I'm sure President Biden has a great reason why, but this guy defrauded people of $35 million. He should be staying in jail for a long time. And we haven't even talked about most of these were people on death row, and the reason they were pardoned is an ideological reason, because they don't believe in the death penalty. Well, okay, you're entitled to that opinion. But that should be decided in Congress. It should not be decided by you letting people who have committed heinous crimes, I mean murders, rapes, horrific crimes, and in my opinion, should receive the death penalty. We should probably talk about this, because I noticed that this is going to be an issue brought up before the Indiana legislature this year, is doing away with Indiana's death penalty. And I think there's a lot of confusion around that among Christians. But that's for another discussion. But the point is, this is absolutely shocking that whatever this started off as what they call that a prerogative of mercy. Wow, I'm just thinking this thing has gotten so blown out of proportion, and now they're even questioning, like on these preemptive things, the Constitution does not really provide any limitations.
So Thomas Sowell, he's a Stanford scholar, very respected scholar. He says something. I think it was him. He said, I'm paraphrasing, our nation is in trouble when people are held accountable for things that they never did, what their ancestors did, but they never did, and people who are not held accountable for the things they actually did.
Right.
That's I mean, that's a good summary, right, of our nation, right? You know, the whole like, well, you know, your great parents did blah 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 blah. Like, okay, so I'm held responsible for that.
Yeah.
But then when you commit a crime or when you rob a store or whatever, then you should get off on that. And so to me, like, this is just another sign of the perversion of justice in America. Like, what is justice? Like, I would think the purpose of pardon will be another, in my imagination, another avenue for true justice to prevail. I don't think the framers of the Constitution, when they put pardon there, were like, oh, we like justice, but we're going to just like pervert justice a little bit in the Constitution.
Well, one of the presidents gave a pardon to those who dodged the draft, for instance, during the Vietnam War.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, again, I think draft dodgers, when you're called to defend your nation, I think you should defend your nation. There's ways that even if you're a conscientious objector, you can still support your country and still find ways to be a positive part of defending your nation, of which you call home. So I get that, and I understand why draft dodgers should face some type of penalty. But again, this was an ideological difference. Some of these folks were arguing for peace and all that kind of thing, and I get it. I don't agree with it, but I get it. And so after that war, again, as an act of conciliation and healing, it was, okay, we're going to provide clemency to this group of you. Okay, that's an olive branch that was thrown out. I understand that, but we're not saying, oh, all of you rapists, all of you murderers, we understand you guys might have had a bad day. We're just going to cut you all loose and just as an act of mercy. No, that is a travesty of justice. I mean, what about the parents who no longer have their son or daughter? I mean, this is terrible. This is, in fact, they should not be sitting on, in my opinion, on death row for the rest of their lives while we pay for them. They should receive swift justice, meaning their life should be taken. That's the purpose of government. That's the purpose of the sword. Not you or I taking vengeance, but government taking justice. And there's a big difference.
Right. So there's the commuting of their death sentence. They're still in jail. But then there's others, like you mentioned, who their sentence is commuted.
Yeah, they're going to walk free.
They're going to walk free. So again, like I just think this is a sign of that the word justice has now very flexible meaning in our nation today.
Or he justified. They said, well, a lot of these were nonviolent offenders, and a lot of them were drug cases. Okay, so what? Doing drugs is illegal, and it's illegal because of the social fallout and consequences. So why are you, on the one hand, saying, no, you're not allowed to possess these drugs or use these drugs, and then on the other hand, you're releasing people who were convicted for illegal drug use? You're releasing them because somehow that's being compassionate, while you're trying to stop, drugs from getting in at the borders or whatever else. And we're going, oh, that's such a tragedy. The tragedy is you won't be consistent in your enforcement of what's good and what's evil because you have no standard. Your mercy is a false mercy, and your compassion is a false compassion.
I think that's the point. Is there is no consistent standard for justice. Hence, we have a situation like this in which it's just like, what? The president can do what? And what is he going to do? And what's the limit to this? Because, I mean, based on the Constitution, what the Constitution says about pardon is interpreted by the Supreme Court. So I wonder if he start pardoning people for, like, he's pardoned for the rest of his life. Someone's going to have to challenge that at the Supreme Court, right? Because that doesn't mean he just can go and kill anybody who does whatever he wants. And he's like, at some point, the pardon power should probably be challenged in the Supreme Court to clarify what is.
Well, this is interesting as well. Okay, so the other issue that was brought up in that article that I referenced earlier was, does the president have the authority for ready for this, a self-pardon? I'm going to pardon myself for the crimes I committed while I was president. And the interesting answer to that is, we don't know, because it's not been tested.
Well,
theoretically, yes, he could self-pardon, but there'd probably be such an outrage because it's not specified.
Sure.
Then that would push it to, as your point, to the Supreme Court, and then the Supreme Court would have to rule on that.
Yeah.
But the parameters are so broad that Congress isn't even allowed to reel them in.
And for me, I'm just trying to understand the idea. I mean, to me, the idea of the pardon sounds like when Jesus was getting crucified. Tradition, they released one prisoner.
Yeah,
right?
Barabbas. Yeah,
Barabbas or Jesus, right? That's what it sounds like. It's just like a throwaway. But even in that case, it was one person. It wasn't just like, hey,
Right. It wasn't whole groups of people.
Right. And I'm not saying that was justified or the Romans were such great rulers or just people, but it seems like a weird traditional, like I want to understand the heart behind it because, again, I think my argument is the framers of the Constitution using the pardon as a way to leverage justice, not to subvert justice.
Exactly.
And that's my guess of their intention. But it seems like right now we don't really know what pardon is supposed to do.
And it seems to me, as it's being currently interpreted and practiced, interpreted rather in practice, it seems to me that it's very much a two-tiered system. Like, why does this guy on death row get off, and this one over here doesn't get off? Like what's the what's the distinction between that? It sounds like you're just picking and choosing favorites. So anyway,
or is a payout situation, which the family, I'm not saying this happened, but I'm saying could have led to that.
I mean, the Bidens wouldn't be guilty of that kind of corruption, Andrew. Are you kidding? I mean, taking money from other nations and stuff like that for political favors? Come on, you got to stop it.
Yeah.
You're on the internet too much. Oh, Lord help us. Anyway, very, very interesting times. I go back to the scripture, to the things the Lord hates, punishing innocent people and letting guilty go free. It seems to me that smacks against both of those. Anyway, all right. Well,
having too much fun for January 2nd.
we're launching into this year, and it's going to be good. So anyway, glad that you guys are with us. Pray that you have just an incredible new year. Look forward to those of you that are nearby and part of our family. Look forward to seeing you on Sunday. Those of you watching from a distance, we love to hear from you. So shoot us a text or email or whatever. Let us know that you're listening, and we'd love to hear from you. And in the meantime, we'll look forward to seeing you all next Thursday. Have a great week.